McFadden. He's a native of Mokina, Illinois, which is a little bit south of Chicago. Unfortunately, he's a White Sox fan. I'm from the north side and I'm a Cub fan, so I don't know why I'm introducing him. But he enlisted in the Marine Reserves and went to MCRD in August of 1986, and his MOS was a 0351. Shortly after being promoted to sergeant, he graduated from Western Illinois University and accepted a commission as a second lieutenant in 1990. He was assigned to 2nd Battalion, 11th Marine Regiment, then served with the 5th Battalion, 11th Marines. He served as a forward observer, a platoon commander, and an artillery liaison officer. The highlight of his active duty was being an artillery liaison officer to Battalion Landing Team 1-1 with the 31st MEU. Upon separation, he was a captain. He married Cindy and then went on to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana to obtain his master's degree in business administration. Rick worked in sales and operations roles for 20 years before leaving the corporate world to start a handyman company in 2018. Please welcome our honored guest for the 5th time, Captain Rick McFadden.
Semper Fi. Man, it's good to be here. I always love coming up here. You know, there's a saying, an expert is someone that travels 50 miles, over 50 miles to talk to you. Sorry, gang, I was only 49. I looked at Google Maps. I'm not an expert. I'm going to try to tell a funny story. Hopefully I can set it up.
Better be better than mine.
Right? Yeah. That's a pretty low bar, though.
You got that right.
So, artillery officers are typically very smart. I was talking to Jack. He finished in the top 25 of his class. Was it Pershing? He got put on the Pershing missiles. So artillery officers are normally, they're like engineering grads, math grads. I was the social science gym class guy. So where their pencils are real sharp, I had my box of crayons, which made it real good because I was always just attached to the infantry as a forward observer or artillery liaison officer, and they had their boxes of crayons, so it worked out very well. Our battery commander, in his wisdom, didn't let me calculate the calculations in the Fire Direction Center, but on this one op, we'd go to the field. I did not serve during war, so we'd go to 29 Palms for 2 or 3 weeks at a time out in the desert. This was a battalion firing exercise, and we'd shoot, move, and communicate, right? Just over and over. Lot of boredom. Well, you know how there's different fads? Human beings, we have different fads. Well, during this time, one of the guns, we were a 6-gun battery, and it's about 8 or 9 guys on a gun. One of the guys bought one of those camping shower bags, and you put it in water, you hang it up, the sun heats up the water, and you can shower. Well, one gun bought a shower bag, and being humans, before long, all the guns had their shower bags. We were, at that time, still an all-male artillery unit. And so it wasn't uncommon to see a bag hanging on the side of a 5-ton, somebody taking a shower butt naked right there in the desert. So on this op, I was the safety officer, which is in peacetime, that's like an extra person in the Fire Direction Center, double checking the data so nobody got hurt. Well, because of the showers, we ran out of water. You know how in my time, I'm not sure in everybody's time, we'd pull these 500-gallon trailers. We call them water bowls. They were water trailers. Water buffalo, water bowls. So we ran out of water. So the FDO, the Fire Direction Officer, Dave Armstrong, First Lieutenant Dave Armstrong, a really intelligent, witty guy, he has to make the phone call for a resupply. So it goes something like this. Battery to battalion, we request to go to the rear to resupply on water. Battalion replies, why do you need more water? We shouldn't have been out of water. Dave says, because we used it to shower. Pause. Battalion says, why did you use your drinking water to shower with? Dave, without missing a beat, says, because we were out of shower water. Which you don't talk that way to battalion, but it was hilarious. Here we are 30 years later or whatever, still talking about it. All right, so we're going to talk about the Banana Wars. Banana Wars were a big deal. Lasted over 35 years. We've all heard of it, right? When in a month or two, when we read Lejeune's address for the Marine Corps birthday, we're going to talk Haiti, we're going to talk Nicaragua. Those countries are going to be mentioned, but I couldn't tell you why. Grady and I are kind of working on this project. We're coming up with these Marine topics that Grady videotapes that we don't know much about. We've heard of it, and we all go, Banana Wars, yeah. But we can't really talk to it, right? So we're gonna go through this, and we're gonna learn about the Marines' intervention in the Banana Wars. Specifically, who thinks the Banana Wars were about bananas, by the way? They were about bananas. It's crazy. Yeah. All right, so what are we gonna do? This picture is a picture I took in May at the National Museum of the Marine Corps. There's just a little bitty exhibit about what we did in the Banana Wars in the Caribbean and Central America. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about the countries involved, the why, how did we end up there over bananas? We're going to talk U.S. doctrine. We're going to look at the campaigns, we're going to talk about famous Marines, and then we're going to talk about the outcomes. I'm not going to go deep on the inter-country politics in Central America, in the Caribbean, because it hurts our brains. I'll give you a couple of examples. Honduras had 210 armed conflicts, civil wars, rebellions, and coups between 1821 and 1900. Pretty hard to keep track of. The Dominican Republic had 3 foreign occupations between 1824 and 1924, Haiti, Spain, and the U.S. By 1914, the country had 43 different presidents and 19 constitutions in the previous 75 years. So needless to say, we're not going to go into all that. Just they had problems and we went in there, okay? So where? We went to Cuba, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Panama. Those were places we went between 1898 and the end, which was in 1934. To share the significance of the Banana Wars, there were 22 Medals of Honor earned by Marines in the Banana Wars. Compare this to 8 in World War I. Let me say that again. There were 8 Medals of Honor in World War I, 22 in the Banana Wars. Isn't that something? This was significant, and I couldn't tell you anything about this 4 months ago. Why? Why the heck were we down there? We had 4 things that we were working on. We wanted to control the sea lanes between the U.S. and the Panama Canal. We wanted to keep foreign powers, this is early 1900s, particularly the newly muscular Germany, out of that area. We wanted to support American investment in underdeveloped countries, right? We know that when an economy gets a stronger economy, when a country gets a stronger economy, everything gets better, right? And then we wanted to establish and maintain local political stability. So oftentimes what the U.S. would do, I would probably say regrettably today, looking back with 2020 hindsight, we would prop up the leaders that supported our efforts, and we get rid of the leaders that didn't support our efforts. So the Marines would go in and out. We didn't always just go in and stay the whole time. We'll go in and out. My goal for the amount of time we have today is to hit the highlights. All right, U.S. doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, President Monroe of 1823, he had this doctrine that the U.S. opposes further European colonization or political intervention in the Western Hemisphere. Teddy Roosevelt comes along in 1904 and says the U.S. has the right to police any unrest in the Western Hemisphere. Teddy Roosevelt was a cowboy, right?
Yeah.
So to give an example of American business investment, there was sugar, fruit, bananas, copper. These were big industries down there. To build up that kind of business, you'd have to staff the business. You'd have to build railroads to the banana fields. You'd have to protect it from robbers. You'd have to build ports to ship it from. You'd have to have shipping lines. Huge, huge investment. And then you'd have a group of rebels want to blow up a railroad. That was a big deal. So the U.S. was going to support these American businesses so they were able to run. So a couple of young, enterprising Americans. Now, bananas had been in Central America since the beginning of time. But a couple of young Americans separately are working down there on other jobs and see an opportunity, and they create two huge companies. One is Standard Fruit, and the other one is the Cayumel Fruit Company. These two will later merge and become Chiquita. We know Chiquita banana, right? I had one today. To give you an idea of American ingenuity and business prowess, in 1892, 175,000 bunches of bananas got to the U.S. By 1899, 7 years later, over 1 million. So bananas had always been in Central America. Two Americans show up, and they, in business, we call it 10x'd it. 10 times, boom, 7 years. Bananas didn't even exist in America. Let me restate that. It was a delicacy. It was a very unusual thing. So part of the business thing too was the marketing. They had to teach Americans what bananas were, how to eat them. Remember the song, the old commercial, "Chiquita banana and I'm here to say," right? That was this whole marketing effort. All right, so that's how we get in this mess, our doctrine. And then we want to make sure and protect American business. Isn't that always kind of how we end up in these wars? It's always has something to do with money, right? There's always, somebody's got to get rich. But let's pause. Just to get an idea, because we're going to be talking numbers of Marines in these different conflicts. So this is USMC end strength from 1898 to 1930. You look, 1910, there's only 9,500 Marines. So when we talk a couple thousand go ashore in X country, it's a big part of the Marine Corps. This was a big part of what the Marines did for 35 years in the early 1900s. By 1930, we're only up to 19,000. Then I want to take just a quick moment, because not everyone's familiar with this. I want to talk about military units. Because we're going to talk about companies and battalions, brigades. A company is about 100 guys, led by a captain. A battalion is made up of multiple companies, like 2 to 4. So they're around 1,000 to 3,000. They're led by a major or a lieutenant colonel. A regiment, and I'll show you a graphic of this in a moment, is made up of like 2 to 4 battalions. So they're 1,000 to 3,000. Brigade is made up of multiple regiments. So that's 3,000 to 5,000. And then there's divisions. Divisions are made up of multiple brigades. So it looks something like this. Multiple companies make a battalion. Multiple battalions make a regiment. Multiple regiments make a brigade. That's just for maybe some of our non-vets. So let's jump into this. Cuba. So obviously we fought the Spanish-American War in 1898, right? The Maine got blown up. Remember the Maine? The war only lasts 7 months. Teddy Roosevelt was a big player in it, right? Got a lot of publicity out of it. Well, the war is over. On the left is actually pictured the Marines raising the flag on Guantanamo Bay during the Spanish-American War. So now we're after the war, and America, as a winner, comes up with the Platt Amendment of 1903. The Platt Amendment gives the U.S. the right to intervene in any of the Cuban affairs that the U.S. chooses. Pretty generous to give ourselves from us. A gift from me to me. I get to do whatever I want. Part of the Platt Amendment was Cuba cannot make a treaty with any other nation. They have to keep their foreign indebtedness low. And they have to allow long-term leases to America for bases, i.e. Guantanamo Bay, right? We still occupy Guantanamo Bay today, which is part of a long-term lease. American investments, there's the money. There's always money somewhere. American investments skyrocket into Cuba, right? And we saw that even into the 50s. So with Cuba, the Marines will make 3 significant landings. Again, there's so much political and commercial things going on. We're going to focus on just what the Marines did. In 1906, rebels will destroy some American plantations. So on September 13th, Major Albertus Catlin lands 130 sailors and Marines from the USS Denver. They're ashore one day, and the US president gets them back on ships. The Cuban governor resigns a couple weeks later. Shortly thereafter, a 2,800-man provisional Marine brigade lands at Havana. So that's in September. November 1st, the U.S. Army takes over. The Marine Corps leaves 1,000 there. Everyone else leaves the island. So that was 1906. 1912, there's a revolt to create a black republic on the eastern side of Cuba, which threatens American investments. So 800 Marines arrive at Guantanamo Bay to bring order. And then March 1917, American sugar is threatened. Well, we're about to go to Europe for World War I. We need the sugar. So a 6th Company battalion gets sent to Cuba to protect our sugar interests. By 1919, only 2 companies remain. So that's Cuba. Let's talk about Guantanamo Bay. Gitmo, anybody stationed at Gitmo? You spent some time at Gitmo?
I spent a little time there.
Ready? Yeah, a few of us. It's a major world base, right? It's a result of that permanent lease. We agreed to a set figure we were going to pay every month since 1903, but Cuba has only cashed 1 check, and that was due to a clerical error. It mistakenly got deposited. They have refused to take any payment. Of course, they don't think we should be there, so they're not even going to accept payment from us. Today it has a naval base, an airfield, and a detention center, and there's about 8,500 sailors and Marines there today. It's kind of a throwback to the old Cuba days. Panama, on the left, Captain Smedley Butler. Anybody ever heard of Smedley Butler? All of us, right? We learned about him in boot camp. He's in front of 2 companies there in Panama. So when we get involved in Panama, at the turn of the century, it is owned by Colombia. It was not an independent country. Panama was owned by Colombia. Late 1901, 245 Marines land at Panama City and a smaller force of Marines at Colón. That red is what is today the Panama Canal. So you can see Panama City's on one side, Colón's on the other. To protect the train route. Because before the canal, it was the trains that got you across. And that's how you could move quickly. You'd sail to Panama, get on the train, get on the western side of Panama, take a ship up to California or wherever you're going. Meanwhile, the French, who had the contract to dig the canal, go bankrupt. So Washington, D.C., is encouraging American businesses to buy out the French so we can build the canal. And they encourage Panama to secede from Colombia. So some kind of backroom stuff going on, right? Colombia doesn't want to lose Panama, So they send troops down to ride the trains near Cologne. So the U.S. on November 2nd, 1903, sent the USS Nashville, full of sailors and Marines, to prevent the Colombians from riding the trains. So they blocked the Colombians, and then Washington, D.C. immediately recognizes the country of Panama. Isn't that funny how we kind of play all the chess pieces?
Yes.
On November 5th, guy you might have heard of, Major Lejeune, John Lejeune, lands 2 companies of Marines at Cologne. And we're all about kind of influencing the elections, right? Make sure our guys get in and the wrong guys get out. December 1903, Smedley, Butler, and 2 companies of Marines arrive, as pictured on the left. January 1904, Brigadier General Elliott, Commandant of the Marines, arrives with 2 battalions and takes control. It's only the second time a Commandant will command Marines out in the field. It only happens twice. And next year we may talk about the first time, just because it's interesting. So Brigadier General Elliott himself, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, goes down and takes control of the Marines in Panama. By March, Colombia agrees not to invade Panama. After that, all the Marines leave except for Lejeune and his battalion. In 1911, the U.S. Army takes control. So let's talk about the opening of the Panama Canal, right? That changed the world, right? Because we could get to places faster. So it opens August 15th, 1914. The USS Ancon is to be the first ship to sail it. How could Marines mess that up? Well, we can. Smedley Butler, in his biography, writes the following about the 15th of August. Forgive me, I'm going to read this, but it's worth it. A group of important and pompous Army officials boarded a tug to make the first trip. None of the Marines had been invited to join them. I walked down to the canal to watch the festivities. By golly, a dugout shot around the bank. It was proudly flying a little Marine flag, and 2 Marines were paddling like the devil. They went through first, cheered and applauded by the crowd. So I just pictured 2 Lance Corporals, right? Senior Lance Corporals, career Lance Corporals. I love that story. I can't find that story anywhere else, but that is in Smedley Butler's biography. Oh, and for the record, those are not necessarily those are 2 Marines in Panama. They're not necessarily the 2 that paddled through. Veracruz, Mexico, 1914. Anybody recognize any of those characters? Who's third from left?
Tall guy?
Next to the tall guy.
He's in the middle.
Is it chest?
So who's this fella?
Chesty Pull?
Major Lejeune. Major Lejeune. In the center is Colonel Waller. Smedley Butler called him the best Marine officer he had ever met. And then here's Smedley Butler. Kind of a who's who in one picture. So the U.S. had $2 billion invested in Mexico. There were 70,000 Americans living in Mexico. Just as background, a coup overthrows the president. Right? Because that's what these countries do. They're constantly overthrowing each other. Taft, who's president, doesn't want to get involved. But Wilson comes into the presidency shortly thereafter, and Wilson's policy is he will only recognize governments that come about constitutionally. So his position is he's going to get involved with these coups that are happening unconstitutionally. Fast forward a little bit, April 6, 1914. The USS Dolphin, a Navy ship, pulls into the port of Tampico to resupply, and the Mexican government under the new president that Wilson doesn't recognize arrests 7 sailors. So what do you do as a naval officer in the early 1900s when something like this happens? You demand an apology from the country and a 21-gun salute. Mexico said, go pound sand. So Wilson goes to Congress and says, because they disrespected us, I want permission to go to war. And Congress says, okay. Because we were disrespected. Different world. Meanwhile, we were concerned Germany was starting to get some influence in that area. And we were concerned with Germany giving arms to Mexico. Remember last year when we talked about World War I? One of the triggers that got us into World War I, us being the US, was the Zimmerman telegram. So the British spies intercepted a telegram from Germany to Mexico that said, if you attack the US, when we win, we'll give you the states that you lost. You know, Texas, Arizona, California. So this is pre-World War I, by like 3 years. We didn't want arms going into Mexico from Germany. So Wilson said, as long as we're going to beat them up for disrespecting us, let's grab the arms that Germany, we had learned that Germany was getting ready to deliver arms. So while we're ashore, we'll do that. So sure enough, that's what we do. We had 7 battleships off the coast of Veracruz. Colonel Lejeune was already in Mexican waters on those ships with the 1st and 2nd Marine Regiments. Colonel Pendleton, anybody heard of Pendleton? John Pendleton, right? Base in California. He's with the 4th Marines heading down the west coast. And on April 21st, to regain our respect, 1914, the U.S. lands 7,000 military personnel, including about 2,500 Marines. In response, Mexico passed out rifles to the population and opened the prison and gave the prisoners rifles and said, go fight the Americans. So there was house fighting for weeks. Colonel Waller, the man we see in the center there, he'll land on May 1st with 894 Marines. He takes over for Lejeune once he gets ashore. Smedley Butler, whom we'll talk about here in a moment, would don civilian clothes and go on a spy mission. He heads into the country of Mexico to scope out what kind of military installations they had in case we chose to just keep on going. You know, not just stop at Veracruz, but keep on going. In the end, there would be 19 American KIAs killed in action, 71 wounded, over 300 Mexicans died, and 9 Marines would win the Medal of Honor, the Battle of Veracruz. Let's talk about Smedley Butler. We all know Smedley Butler, right? Fascinating story about old Smedley. He was a character. He's born July 30th, 1881, in a wealthy suburb of Philadelphia. Both sides of his family were prominent and wealthy. His father was a congressman for 31 years. His family was known as the Fighting Quakers. Quakers normally don't participate in war, but both of his grandfathers participated in the Civil War because ending slavery was more important to the Butlers, the Darlingtons, which was the maternal name, and the Butlers, than going to war. So the Butlers were known as the Fighting Quakers. So in 1898, Smedley Butler is 16 years old. He wants to go to the Spanish-American War, right? That's all in the news. He goes to the Army recruiter, says, I'm 18. The guy patted him on the head and said, you know, go home, son. You know, you're not 18. So he goes to the Marines, and they said, sure, because they were short on people. His dad biggest concern was not that he was lying or that he was trying to join the Marines or he was trying to go to a war, but he said, don't add one more year to your age because I haven't been married long enough for you to be 19. Because he was a good Quaker, right? So for some reason, this 16-year-old boy from Philadelphia enters the Marine Corps as a second lieutenant. Had nothing to do with his dad being a congressman for 31 years, right? So Smedley Butler joins the Marine Corps at 16 and is made a second lieutenant. He fights in the Philippine-American War. In his first year, he misses the Spanish-American. It ends. So that lasted like 7 months. It was over real quick. But he goes to the Philippine-American War. Then the following year of 1900 is the Boxer Rebellion in China. And then he spends like 30 years doing the Banana Wars. He's going to win 2 Medals of Honor. I think only like 18 people in the history of the United States has. Only 2 Marines have won 2 Medals of Honor. If you'd humor me, I'd like to read them both to you because they kind of apply to what we're going to be talking about here. His first one, he gets to Veracruz for what we just talked about, Mexico. For distinguished conduct in battle, engagement of Veracruz, 22 April 1914. Major Butler was eminent and conspicuous in command of his battalion. He exhibited courage and skill in leading his men through the action of the 22nd and in the final occupation of the city. So that's April of 14. November of 15, he gets his second. It's rare for anybody to get any. This guy gets 2 in a year. Second one is in Haiti. For extraordinary heroism in action as commanding officer, Major Butler led the attack on Fort Riviere, Haiti, 17 November 1915. Following a concentrated drive, several different detachments of Marines gradually closed in on the old French bastion fort in an effort to cut off all avenues of retreat for the Caicos. They were the rebels. Reaching the fort on the southern side, where there was a small opening in the wall, Major Butler gave a signal to attack the Marines from the 15th Company. They poured through the breach, engaged the Caicos, took the bastion, and crushed the Caicos resistance. 2 Medals of Honor, 1 year. Oh, funny side story. So in 1924, Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia, has a major crime problem. Prohibition's going on, speakeasies. The mayor calls up the president and says, hey, can I get one of your generals to come take over my police force and help me clean up the city? So the president calls Commandant. Commandant sends Butler. So for 2 years, Butler goes on leave from the Marine Corps, and he runs the Philadelphia Police Department. But he's ruthless, and he shuts down all the speakeasies. Well, who gets mad but the wealthy? They can't get their booze. So in 1926, he got fired and went back to the Marine Corps. Smedley Butler. At 16, he enlists, 1898. 1900, he's in the Philippines fighting the Philippine-American War. And he gets a tattoo on his whole torso. This is a picture of his tattoo. It actually got infected and he had a bad fever. The next year he goes and fights in the Boxer Rebellion. He gets wounded and loses Latin America. True story. Now I want to tell you about a guy named Lou. Lou is born June 26, 1898. He's from West Point, Virginia, which is between Richmond and the Chesapeake Bay. He's the son of a wholesale grocery salesman. His grandfather was killed riding in the cavalry with Jeb Stuart during the Civil War. He'll go off to the Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia. He's ranked 177th out of 233 cadets. It's in the bottom of his class. Some of you know where I'm going, right? He leaves VMI in August of 18 because he wants to go fight in World War I. Once again, the war ends before he gets there. So after graduating from MCRD Paris Island, he goes off to Officer Candidate School. He graduates Officer Candidate School June 16th of 1919. He's ranked 128th in his class, again, at the bottom. But unfortunately, post-World War I, there's a reduction in force, and he's put on inactive service, and he loses his commission. He's given the rank of corporal, and he's put on inactive service. So he heads, what does any young tough guy looking for trouble do when you get put on inactive service? He starts the journey from West Point, Virginia up to New York because he's going to join the Polish American Liberation Army. Honest to goodness, I'm not making it up. So post World War I, Poland is partitioned, and there was freedom fighters trying to regain Poland's freedom. So while he stopped in D.C., while Lewis stopped in D.C., he meets a Marine, and the Marine says, you don't have to go over to Poland. Come back to the Marines on active duty. We'll send you to Haiti. So our enlisted guys are officers running the Haitian National Guard. So at age 21, he boards a ship for Haiti. He arrives in Haiti in July 1919. We know him as Louis Burwell Puller, aka Chesty. That's how Chesty got into the Marine Corps. He's a distant cousin of George S. Patton, the famous general. He'll become the most decorated Marine. Smedley Butler was. Puller will be the next most decorated. Chesty will fight in the Banana Wars, World War II, and Korea. For the non-Marines, in boot camp, it's popular. At night when you hit the rack, you say goodnight, Chesty Puller, right? Wherever you are, that's right. Haiti, just for info, was owned by France. It was the only successful slave revolt in the world. The slaves actually took over the country and maintained control. That's just some background. By 1910, Haiti was heavily indebted to France, Germany, and the US. There was concerns again about Germany's influence. And at the end of 1914, US banks were worried that their gold reserves in Haiti would be stolen. Legitimate concern, so what do? So what you do is you send you send Major Hatch and 65 Marines into Haiti, and they snatch $500,000 worth of gold while the 5th Marines are sitting out on ships in the bay. Again, true story. The U.S. was worried about their gold. They sent in 65 Marines to bring it out. July 1915, a new president comes to power in Haiti. His opponents are all jailed, and he has them slaughtered. 162 of the 167 opponents were killed. So then the next day, a mob storms the French legation where that same Haitian president is now hiding, and they hack him to death with a machete. So what do? Send in the Marines. So off we went again. July 28, 1915, 2 companies of Marines land, more will follow. The opposition is known as the Caicos, which loosely translates to bandits or revolutionaries. If you're with them, they're revolutionaries. If you're against them, they're bandits, right? Isn't that how it works? By August, order was restored with a brigade of Marines on the ground led by Colonel Waller. He brought 88 officers and 1,941 Marines. Remember, in 1915, there was only 10,000 Marines in the whole Marine Corps. So we have like 20% just in Haiti. The price of us intervening is the U.S. gave a gift from me to me of a 10-year treaty with Haiti, allowing the U.S. to control all their customs and to provide basically police oversight in Haiti for 10 years. A very generous gift from me to me, right? The U.S. government. This is where Chesty gets his start. There are plenty of jungle fights and town defense continue out the entire duration, which lasted over 15 years. Who is this guy? Anybody remember?
Dan Daly.
Dan Daly. Gunnery Sergeant Dan Daly. The only other Marine to get 2 Medals of Honor. So he'll get his 2nd Medal of Honor in Haiti. So I'll tell you his story. On the night of October 24th, 1915, a mounted patrol, so on horses, led by Major Smedley Butler, were ambushed while crossing a river. One of the casualties was the horse that had the only machine gun strapped to it, went to the bottom of the river. Under heavy enemy fire, Dan Daly, gunnery sergeant, goes into the river, swims to the bottom, finds the horse, releases the machine gun, comes up with the machine gun like Captain America, and uses the machine gun to repel the assault during the night. The original Captain America. By the 1920s, the Marines were reduced to 500. Marines will leave Haiti August of 1934. Little more Chesty history, because we can all talk about Chesty in World War II and Korea, but what else can we really say? We don't know much. You will now. So obviously he arrived in Haiti in 1919. He gets attacked on his first patrol. He instinctively commands the patrol. They repel the ambush. It's like he's been doing it his whole life. By the time he leaves Haiti, he will be involved in 40 actions. The guerrilla combat was constant. He's obviously introduced to ambushing and being ambushed. By the end, while being young, he will be one of the most combat seasoned officers in the Marine Corps. Marines, because he's not even an officer yet. Marines. He'll return stateside and he'll finally be commissioned March 6th of 1924. After completing assignments at the Marine Barracks in Norfolk, he goes to the basic school in Quantico, and then he's attached to the 10th Marine Artillery Regiment, because all good Marines are artillerymen. He was assigned to the Marine Barracks at Pearl Harbor in 1926, and then he went to San Diego in 1928. Nicaragua. I should know this, but I want to say that this was our longest operation before Afghanistan. We were in Nicaragua a long time. Fascinating. You always meet, you always come across crazy things at Cooper's Troopers. I'm talking to Dan. Dan served with a warrant officer that was in Nicaragua.
In 38. Yeah, but he got out after World War II, had broken back.
Right.
Then he came back in, but because he was a bursting bomb in a technical field.
Isn't that crazy? That there was a senior Marine from Nicaragua
67.
served with Dan. I love that story. Okay, back to our story here. Top left picture, that's Marines with Sandino. He was the big rebel. That was Sandino's flag that the Marines captured. In the bottom left, Sandino is in the middle. We're going to be talking a lot about Nicolas Calderon Sandino. He was the Nicaraguan rebel leader. Nicaragua was going bankrupt, was unstable. So May 1910, Major Butler, Smedley Butler, takes two companies and they land at the city of Bluefields, which is in southeastern Nicaragua. Two American banks that had loaned Nicaragua over $14 million in early 1900 money set up a national bank and took control of Nicaragua's customs. The goal was to keep pro-American governments in place and protect American business. In August 1912, more reinforcements arrived, so Butler moved his battalion to the west side of the country to Managua. Has anybody ever been to Nicaragua, Managua? One person? There's always somebody. So Butler was sent to Managua. He was going to protect the trains. Funny stories. He's going to protect the trains. But at one point, the rebels took over the train and made the Marines walk. So while they're walking back, one of the rebels along the walk got in Butler's face with a revolver. And the story goes, Butler grabbed the revolver, emptied the shells, and threw it on the ground, and all the other rebels broke out laughing because it looked so funny. It was even their guy that got disgraced. Then, a very large woman approached Butler with a machete, so he just punched her in the face and she dropped the machete. I don't share this story like that's a good thing to be punching women, but that's Smedley Butler. Oh my word. I'm going to recommend his book at the end. It's just he's a hoot. He is so politically incorrect. He'd be fired in a second. But what a character. Colonel Pendleton again arrives in September. Pendleton assigns Butler railroad security. During one attack of the trains, some of the Marines got left behind. Smedley Butler just put the pedal to the metal, and shot at the rebels and then just blew through them. Some of the Marines fell off the train and they had to get a hand cart. Can you just picture that scene? They eventually catch up, but they're doing the hand cart like in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. It was in Nicaragua that Butler earns the nickname Old Gimlet Eye. A gimlet is a piercing tool. Butler had a bad temper and he had piercing eyes because he got malaria, so his eyes got sunken. In October, the rebels held a hill. Colonel Pendleton had the artillery soften the hill. 3 battalions of Marines and sailors will take the hill. 7 Marines and sailors get killed in just that one operation alone. After some more battles, basically the revolution gets put down in 1925. 105 Marines are left. Everyone else leaves. Fast forward to 1926. This is where Dan's warrant officer kind of comes in this period. The government changes hands again. Coolidge offers the new government weapons and ammo. We've never seen that in modern days, right? Where we do that. We do that all the time, right? So sure enough, Marines have to go ashore again in January of 27. They land at 3 points on the East Coast. By March, there's 2,000 Marines ashore, including the 5th Marines. We have some 5th Marine guys here, right? Any 5th Marine guys? Was Al 5th Marines?
5th Marine Division.
Oh, this is 5th Marine Regiment.
Oh.
Excuse me.
I see it.
Yeah. 5th Marine Division didn't exist in my time, so I have to. In February, for our flyers, in February, Marine Observation Squadron 1, commanded by Major Ross E. Rowell, lands with 8 officers and 81 enlisted. In Nicaragua Part 2, post-1926, it's the first time that we'll use flyers to dive bomb, we'll use air-to-ground communication, and we'll also move troops and supplies by air. It's also the first time we use ground radio communication. The Marines had 3,300 men, 2 squadrons by May, including the 11th Marines. The Marines, once again, were tasked with running the Nicaraguan National Guard, right? Our enlisted would kind of like be their officers. Most of the rebels get defeated except for Sandino. He was very charismatic, frail looking, but energetic. He worked in the Mexican oil fields, even rode with Pancho Villa. July 15th, Marines will pursue Sandino to near the Honduran border. Some Marines are leading the National Guardsmen, and they get surrounded by Sandino. Sandino says, Marines, I'm giving you an opportunity to surrender. Probably not a good idea to say that, right? Captain Gilbert Hatfield of the Marine Corps said, the Marines don't know how to surrender. And we fought our way out of it. During the same battle, it was our first use of close air support. So what that means is the infantry's on the ground, that the planes were firing on the enemy in front of our infantry in support, like a coordinated effort. We call that close air support. Chief Marine Gunner Michael Wadrasek, known as the Polish War Horse. What a great nickname. He strafes the rebels until he's out of ammo. So that's our first close air support. Other planes were used for dive bombing, for low altitude support. Rowell will win the first Marine Distinguished Flying Cross. and there's ongoing fighting, particularly against Sandino's men in the mountains. Pictured on the left is what Nelly trained on when he first got in.
I remember that.
Right. December 1927, First Lieutenant Christian Schilt. Boy, I bet they had fun with his name at boot camp. Flew in medicine and evacuated wounded in a Vought 02U-1 Corsair. And that's what's pictured on the right. Schilt is pictured on the left. Those Corsairs required wing runners. I had to look up, what is a wing runner? A wing runner is because they didn't have brakes. So you'd have human beings run out and grab the wings to slow the plane down when it landed. During January 1928, Schilt made 10 daring flights, bringing 1,400 pounds of medicine and supplies, flying out 18 wounded. He'll receive the Medal of Honor. In the spring, Captain Merritt Edson, anybody know Edson? Edson's Raiders, World War II. Jungle Fighters, what a coincidence. He proposes a plan to get Sandino. He takes a 16-foot flat-bottom launch powered by an old Model T engine and goes up the Cocoa River in pursuit of Sandino. Him and his Marines will live on bananas, beans, beef, and monkey meat. Question of the day, which is worse, an MRE or monkey meat?
MRE.
Sandino never gets captured, but the U.S. friendly government was put in place. The 5th Marines were the last to leave. They leave in January of 1933. Going back to Chesty, so what did Chesty do after that? December 1928, he's assigned to the Nicaraguan National Guard Detachment, where he's awarded his first Navy Cross for his actions from February 16th to the 19th, 1930. In summary, it's for 5 successful engagements against superior numbers of armed bandit forces. He'll return stateside in 31. He'll complete a year-long company commander's course in Fort Benning. Thereafter, he returns to Nicaragua in 1932, and he's awarded his 2nd Navy Cross. And on his return, the front page of the local newspaper in Nicaragua, the headline is, "Marines bring the Tiger of Segovia to fight Sandino." Now, which is a better nickname, Chesty or the Tiger? They're both pretty good. Chesty wins. Puller will lead American Marines against Sandino's rebels in the last major engagement at El Sos on December 26, 1932. We're going to land this plane, I promise. Last one, Dominican Republic. So Haiti and Dominican Republic share an island, right? There's kind of a line down the middle. In 1904, President Teddy Roosevelt forced the country, the Dominican Republic, to collect their customs and pay off their debt to stabilize. In 1911, 750 Marines of the 2nd Provisional Regiment sat off the coast for 2 months. Then on May 5th, 1916, 150 Marines under Captain Frederick Wise will land. And then once again, the Dominican Republic president just resigns. On May 15th, the Battalion Marines led by Major Newt Hall will land. By the end of May 1916, 750 Marines are ashore under Colonel Theodore Kane. In June, Colonel Pendleton will bring in his 4th Marine Regiment. In late June, Pendleton is involved in a large battle that is the first time Marines use modern artillery and machine guns in battle. So this is what, this is right before World War I, a year or 2 before World War I. So that's the first time we use modern artillery and machine gun support. By the fall, nearly 2,000 Marines are ashore, making up the 2nd Marine Brigade. After World War I, the 15th Regiment and the 1st Air Squad will arrive. In 1924, a constitutional government is put into place, and the Marines leave September of 27. So that leads us to the end of the Banana Wars. By the 20s, Americans were just over it, right? We were just tired of the wars. In 1929, the Senate disavows the Roosevelt Corollary. Remember, that was the one where we said we could police anywhere we want in the Western Hemisphere. And then in 1933, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt comes to power, and he introduces the term good neighbor, which means non-intervention. So that brings an end to the Banana Wars for the Marine Corps. In the end, the Marine Corps will lose 84 Marines during this period of time. 171 are wounded. Then, I always like to give the postscript. I'm always wondering what happened afterwards. What did Robert E. Lee do after the Civil War? I love that stuff. Postscript: Cuba. 2 years after we left, a vicious dictator took power. The U.S. would eventually encourage Batista, which many of us remember, right, to become president. Well, he turned out to be a turd as well. And then Fidel Castro took over in 1958, and now we have a communist party off the tip of Florida. Panama. Noriega comes to power in 1984. His regime fosters a criminal economy of drugs and money laundering. In 1988, Reagan will seize all Panamanian assets in the U.S. and will send troops ashore in 1989. 23 Americans are killed, 324 are wounded. Haiti, repeated coups, still goes on today. 1994, we land 20,000 troops to help restore stability. Anybody remember this character? Nicaragua. 1934. Oh, I gotta pause because this is another story. 1934. Sandino is still running around. We're gone. The president, not the acting, the actual president of Nicaragua, he invites Sandino to dinner at the presidential palace, extends the olive branch, has dinner. But the whole plan was, as Sandino left, the president's people killed him. They ambushed his car. He invited him to dinner so he knew where he would be. How barbaric is that? And that's only like a century ago. I mean, today we shoot at our opponents at political rallies. We don't ambush them, right? All right, that was much funnier in my head as I rehearsed. All right, so Sandino's dead. 2 years later, the new president comes to power, and he uses that National Guard that we created against his people, right? To bring tyranny against the people. In 1978, a political party called the Sandinistas. Sandinistas, thank you, Bear. After the name Sandino. Right? They took the name of Sandino. They come to power in 78. The Contras are formed to combat them. Sandinistas. In 1983, the U.S. forbids government funding to the Contras. But the Reagan administration illegally, allegedly or not, to fund the Contras, and our Marine Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North got wrapped up in it. It was very public for the younger folks. It was a big deal during the 80s. The Dominican Republic in 63, which is like 30 years later, after we leave the Banana Wars, Lyndon Johnson has to send 24,000 troops in. So it didn't quite work out well. Smedley Butler. What happens to Smedley Butler?
Yeah.
So Smedley, after 30 plus years in the Marine Corps, he gets in trouble. He's got a big mouth, right? In 1931, he publicly repeats a rumor about Mussolini. In the early 30s, the Italian leader, Mussolini, was respected in the United States. We thought he was a good guy. Kind of like Hitler, right? Early on, some people thought Hitler was going to be a good guy. Well, the rumor was Mussolini was involved in a hit and run that he killed a small boy. When asked about it, Mussolini's response was, "What is one life in the affairs of the state?" That was the rumor. Because Butler repeated the rumor, which would end up being true, we would find out that it was true, the Marine Corps court-martials him. He's the first general to be court-martialed since the Civil War. He gets passed over for commandant. So he retires October 1st, 1931, runs for the Senate, U.S. Senate, loses in the primary. In 1932, there was something called the Bonus Army. The Bonus Army, the veterans of World War I were promised a bonus when they either died or 1945, whichever came first. Such a deal, right? You get a bonus either in 1945 or when you die. Well, 1931 is the Depression, and they're hungry. They need money. So the Bonus Army of protesters, kind of like that happened in Seattle. What was that called? Occupy Seattle or whatever. What was that group in 2020? Well, Antifa, but the Bonus Army encamped in D.C. and they were protesting to get their bonuses early. Smedley Butler was kind of a spokesperson for this group. The encampment, just as a trivial thing, and I'm almost done, I promise. The U.S. government sicked General MacArthur with Majors Eisenhower and Patton and their cavalry, all horse-mounted, stormed the encampment, killing some of the veteran protesters and one baby. How crazy is that? In 1934, Butler becomes a significant, gets approached. 1934. So get this. Our hero, Smedley Butler. 1934, he gets approached by significant businessmen, rich businessmen. They want Butler to put together a militia to overthrow FDR because they opposed the New Deal, right? FDR's New Deal. Butler turns it down, but he ends up having to testify before Congress. So there was actually an attempted coup. There was plans to overthrow an American president back in 1934. 1935 to 1937, Butler got very active in the anti-war movement. He would give many speeches that turned into a book called War is a Racket. He actually passes at the age of 58 in 1940. War is a Racket is an anti-war classic. Has anybody heard of it? It's classic, right? If you'll just bear with me, I think it's pretty amazing the things he says. This is the most common quote that comes out of it. Butler writes, "I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico and especially Tampico safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National Citibank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, I helped see to it that the Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do is operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents." Isn't that something? Postscript Marine Corps Small Wars Manual. We got that out of the Banana Wars. That's still around today. That's on the comments Major General Edson is there. Edson Raiders. He took his jungle fighting experience to World War II. If you'd like to read more about this, these are some great books. The Bennett Wars is kind of like the textbook on it. Old Gimlet Eyes is a fun book. It's a fun book about Smedley Butler. And then in 2020, a guy named Katz wrote a book. Have we lost the microphone? We're still good? Gangsters of Capitalism, Smedley Butler, the Marines, and Making and Breaking of America's Empire. That Katz guy has a bunch of podcasts from when he was getting his book out. They're really interesting if you don't want to read the book. And I just want to conclude by saying two things. As Marines, we have a proud heritage. And you can see how this baton gets passed from generation to generation.